Much. If I could have your attention, so we could begin the speaking portion. Welcome all of you to Politics and Eggs here at St. A's. We thank all of the good work that is being done in the Institute by Neil Levesque and his extraordinary team, as well as the New England Council team, led by Larry Zabar in our office. These events are extraordinarily informative and so well attended and well produced, to say the least. So we want to thank the people behind the scenes that make it possible. So thank you. And thinking of thanking people, I look around the room and I see all of the banners. The banners is also what makes it possible. All of these corporate sponsors of the Politics and Eggs, not just corporate sponsors, but they're community leaders in our community here in New Hampshire. And if you know anyone that's affiliated with any of these companies, you should thank them for supporting the Politics and Eggs series. It wouldn't be possible without their very generous support. So we thank them. We at the New England Council are happy to say that we're back in person. And this is our second event of 2022 of the Politics and Eggs. I think you would all agree we're going to be seeing a lot of other events like this in the weeks and the months ahead here in this great state. The New England Council just resumed our in-person event 1 month ago, and I can't even keep up with all of the events that we've had. This past week, the New England Council was in southern New England, where they hosted the senator from Rhode Island, the senior senator, Senator Jack Reed, and then they left there to go to Hartford, Connecticut, to a reception that we had for Congressman John Larson of Hartford. Later this week, we're going to be in Washington, where we have a series in Washington, a Capitol Conversation, we call it, where we'll have Senator Ed Markey speak to the New England Council members that we have down in D.C. May 3rd, we're going to head back to Connecticut to hear from Congressman Joe Courtney, and then back to D.C. for the second week of May, where we'll have a Capitol Conversation breakfast with Senator Angus King of Maine. And then on May 11th and 12th, we'll be holding our Washington Leaders Conference for the first time since 2019, where we gather over 200 some of our New Englanders who will go down to Washington for 2 days to hear from people from the administration, Capitol Hill, media personalities, to get a good update of what is going on in Washington and what is going to be forecast for the future in Washington. So all in all, a very exciting period, to say the least. I also add, later in May, Lech Walesa will be speaking to the New England Council in Boston, and we hope that many of you will participate in that, talk about a timely event, to say the least. So all in all, a very active agenda for the New England Council. We thank all of you for your support. You can find more information for all of these events on our brand new website, newenglandcouncil.com. But today we're delighted to welcome the governor of the great state, the Razorback State, to the Granite State. And Governor Hutchinson is visiting here in New Hampshire as he wraps up his second term, and I guess he considers his own political future. To introduce him, I'm delighted to invite to the stage one of the funniest governors that we have in the United States. I don't know how many people had an opportunity to get any clips from the gridiron, but I got a report just recently, and they just said he rocked. I don't know what that means, but he rocked that night. He stole the show. The room was his. So with that, he's also a very serious and thoughtful executive, and obviously well respected here in our state. So give a warm Politics and Eggs welcome to the governor of this great state, Governor Chris Sununu.
All right, good morning. That's quite an intro. It reminded me, we were at I think we were in Florida for an RGA event, and I was doing a panel discussion with former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos. Glenn Youngkin was there. We're talking about education. Brian Kemp was one of the other governors on the panel. And when they got down to Brian to say something, he's a great governor. And in that Georgia accent, he goes, I love Governor Sununu. He's like the game show host of governors. And I took that as a compliment. I said, I'll take it. But it is great to be here, and I hope you guys don't mind. Casual Monday for the Gov. I went without the tie. I kept it casual. But I did ask. I knew Governor Hutchinson was coming up, and I did kind of say, hey, I'd love to come and introduce him because, a lot of you get to see me, and especially as the New England Council and across New Hampshire. But and you heard the stories from time to time, especially during COVID, right? All the governors really, really had to step up as a team. The legislatures kind of disappeared, and even on the national level, we had to work directly with the White House, and it was governors that really stood up. And Republican and Democrat would have our calls about once a week. But then the Republican governors would really come together and say, okay, how are you managing this? How are you managing that? And we just throw ideas on the table because we were all writing this playbook at the same time. And Asa was such a key, integral part of that. I got to know Asa, I guess, a little bit before, while I was running, and then obviously when I first became governor. And he's just a guy that will always step up, will always answer the call, will always throw 2 cents of advice your way, and he has an incredible experience. And I got to know over the years, I knew him as governor, but then I started realizing this incredible history. I literally have to write it down because I have to go through it. U.S. Attorney, right? Was a U.S. representative for Arkansas. Was it the 3rd District, if I'm remembering correctly? Chair of the Arkansas GOP, head of the DEA for President George W. Bush, Undersecretary for Homeland Security, and then really in our toughest times of COVID, became chair, he was chair of the National Governors Association. So he was really all of the governors' representative to the White House on a national level. But even more impressive than that, he was vice chair while Cuomo was chair. Let me tell you, that was hard. That was crazy. We'd be on these calls, and Andrew Cuomo doing whatever Andrew Cuomo does. God figured that out. And Asa was always the rational voice that would come in kind of after that, kind of straighten everything out. And it really was an amazing voice of reason in a time of, it was really tough. It really was. I mean, and what was happening in the South was so different than what was happening in New England, which was so different than what was happening on the West Coast. But Asa, as kind of the leader of the Republican governors and leader of the entire gubernatorial assembly for the country, was just awesome. You knew you had somebody strong, steering the ship with great experience, and what I like to call a great rational conservative, right? Most conservatives are rational, but one of the great ones that leads from a grounding of experience, leads from a grounding of family and faith, and has those guiding principles, can talk to anyone about any issue because he brings that background to the table, and does it in a way that connects with that empathetic connection that you always want to make, right? You want to talk to someone in a way that you're listening to them. What are their issues, right? As politicians, we tend to talk at people. But Asa is one of those that just, when you have that discussion, he makes the eye contact and you go, wow, he's really listening. You ever have those conversations? You're like, I can't tell if this guy's listening to me. I've been in those, right? But man, you get it. You really do. And you think, here's someone that governs from the grassroots up. And that's what we love in New Hampshire. That's how we do it. Republican or Democrat, you got to govern really from the grassroots up and get those grass tops coalitions moving forward. The other interesting fact, we have a lot in common as well, which I didn't realize. We both had brothers that were elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. We both had brothers that went on to be U.S. senators. We both had brothers that after their first term lost as U.S. senators, and we were both smart enough not to run for the U.S. Senate. So with that, I just want to introduce you to my very good friend, Asa Hutchinson. Gov. Thank you, man.
Chris, I think we could spend quite a bit of time talking about brothers in politics. A lot of stories that go with that, but I'm very honored that you're out here today. I count you as a friend among the governors, and for your introduction today, I'm very, very grateful. Governor Sununu is a star among the governors. As chair of the NGA, I get to see all the governors in action, and Chris really has the respect of all the other governors, and I'm very grateful for his friendship and his leadership here. I might add, I'm particularly like what you're doing in housing. Your investment there that's been approved, that affordable housing is something that's challenging for all of America, and you've taken a real lead in that. I'm also appreciative of the New England Council and being able to host this. What a great event for someone from Arkansas. I know someone from Arkansas has been here before, but for anyone who cherishes politics and has a life in politics, this is the place to be, and I'm so honored and excited to be here in New Hampshire today. And you might not realize it, but New Hampshire has shaped my world and really has allowed me to be governor. Now, you're going to have to wonder about that, but in 1980, Ronald Reagan was campaigning for president in the Republican primary. He did not do well in Iowa, and he came here to New Hampshire, and there was that televised debate where he said, "Mr. Green, I'm paying for this microphone," and it caught the imagination of people across the country in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire voted for Ronald Reagan that primary, pulled him through. He got elected president, and because he got elected president, I got appointed United States Attorney. And so had New Hampshire not come through for President Reagan, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be governor. So I owe a lot to New Hampshire. You know, if you look back at my time as United States Attorney, I was 31 years of age at the time. And I was the youngest U.S. attorney in the nation. It was such a significant role to play during that time frame. And I thought back in my life, and it all starts with how you grow up. And there's so many comparisons to rural New Hampshire and parts of rural Arkansas. I grew up, my mom and dad had high school education. They didn't go to college. My dad had a farm. He worked hard. And he knew that education was important for his children. And I was the youngest of 6 children. And what an incredible environment to grow up where your parents teach you about the importance of faith and community and making a difference. And as long as God gives you breath in this earth, you're here to try to impact things in a positive way. And so, with that background, I strived in education. I went to law school, and I'll never forget, in law school, I met a young lady from Georgia, and she was teaching in Memphis, Tennessee. And I had a 1969 Plymouth Valiant, and this was in the days of very high gas prices, similar to where we are right now. And so even though I had a car, I couldn't buy law books and put gas in the car at the same time. So I hitchhiked from Fayetteville to Memphis to date Susan. And let me tell you, that was a rocky start, particularly whenever I had to hitchhike over to Georgia to ask permission from her dad to marry his daughter. It was not the best impression in the world. But despite that, we've been married 48 years, and we have 4 children and 6 grandchildren. We're proud of them, and family is important to me. I started my political career, probably I get my best start when I was United States Attorney. I left and ran for the U.S. Senate. And I've been state party chairman in Arkansas, so I identify with building a party. We were in a minority status. Bill Clinton was governor of the state when I was chairman, and so we were so much in the minority that we did not have many in the legislature. All of that has shifted, and today we have all Republican senators, congressmen, state constitutional officers, a supermajority in both houses. How did that change come about? I think it was because of fighting the battle for a long time, because our state became more conservative over time. But I like to look at from where I started and to the time that I am governor now, that I have stood consistently for a conservative position, and as the governor said, a common sense conservatism. And I haven't changed my politics through those years, but the politics of America have shifted. and it's become more conservative in our state, and now we're majority Republican. But you might ask the question today, why is a Southern governor coming to New Hampshire? Well, you probably know part of the reason, but you know, whenever I look at America and how long I've been engaged in politics, I am optimistic about our future, but I also believe that we're at a crossroads. I believe that we need to make some course corrections, both in the political world and in America's role in the world. We need to lead, and we need to define our position better. We need to make some course corrections, and it starts with leadership. And we need to have leaders today that are passionate about ideas that they believe in and principles, but they also need to fight hard and be able to come together when the election is over and work together for the goodness of our country. And that's fundamentally what I believe we need to have as a message today in America and in the GOP. And so it's natural to come to New Hampshire. There's not a better place to start a national message than to be here in New Hampshire. Whenever you look at, when I ran for governor 7.5 years ago, I told the people of Arkansas I wanted to do three key things. I made three promises. I wanted to lower taxes by $100 million. I wanted to put computer coding in every high school in Arkansas, and nobody thought I'd get elected on that platform. And then thirdly, I wanted to have a more efficient government. And after 7.5 years, we not only have fulfilled those promises, but have done much more. Not just a $100 million tax cut, but it really worked. We consistently lowered taxes in Arkansas so that it amounts to a $500 million tax cut through those years. We've lowered taxes. When it comes to computer science, we not only put computer science in every high school in Arkansas, we went from 1,100 students that were taking computer science when I started to over 12,500 now. We went from fewer than 20 teachers that were qualified to teach computer science to over 600 that are certified. And that's making a difference for our technology companies. It's making a difference for those young people that want to have opportunities in the future that they never dreamed of coming from a rural state. We not only lowered taxes, but we also invested in teachers. We raised teacher pay in Arkansas. We've had the largest investment in a decade in education and supported higher education. We increased the safety net for those that are struggling through life, and we wanted to make sure that we could help them climb the ladder of success, get a job, get the training that they need. And so even with lowering taxes, increasing teacher pay, we created a surplus of over $1 billion, and we have $1.2 billion in a reserve fund, which is 20% of our state budget. I tell you that story of what we've done because it is important that we have leaders that know how to balance a budget. In fact, the last time we balanced a budget in our country was when Bill Clinton was president and I was in the Congress of the United States. And we balanced our budget, and that was a long time ago. And so we need to make sure that we have leaders that can understand and balance the budget and to create the kind of surpluses that might be unique, but we're going to be a solid partner for the businesses that we recruit. I have my Secretary of Commerce here who was born in New Hampshire, but I moved to Florida and I recruited him to Arkansas, and we've been creating businesses in our state. And we're one of the top states for percent of in-migration. Our state is growing. We're recruiting industry, and that's been a priority of mine. And so we started, when I ran for governor, with ideas. Ideas become policy, and policy makes a difference in people's lives. And to me, that's the reward of politics. That's why you engage in this. And it is really reflecting the spirit of America, that when you have bold ideas, whenever you have a passion for our country, that you can make a difference. And I know that that can be reflected in our future as well. Now let's go to more of the direction of our country for just a moment, and let me talk about a few issues. First of all, in education. Education is foundational, just as it has been in my life for progress of our country and giving the next generation all the opportunities that they need. And during the pandemic, we realized how important being in the classroom is. We realized how important educators and teachers are every day. And the study just came out that Arkansas was #2 in the nation among the states in terms of days in the classroom during the pandemic. And I'm very proud of that because it was a priority to keep our classes open. And then in hindsight, from President Biden all the way down, we recognized how important it was to keep those classes open, to have that instruction, because the children struggle without that. We also tried to keep our businesses open, as Governor Sununu did, made it a priority here. And I didn't distinguish between an essential business and a non-essential business. If you have a business and you're providing for families through that business, I believe you're essential, and it's essential to the families that depend upon it. And so we kept them open, but on the terms of education, coming out of the pandemic, parents all of a sudden realize how important it is what's happening to their children, and so they became more engaged in the classroom. And that is a good thing. They became more engaged in what's happening with their school board and their schools and what their children are being taught. And we need to embrace that and not resist it. And so we want to make sure that education is reflecting the values and doesn't undermine the values of the parents. But you know, whenever you look at some of the influences over education, I think it is right that we don't let corporate America dictate political ideology to those that are representing the people that they represent and the direction of our country. But at the same time, whenever we disagree with what a business says, we should not, as a state, use punitive action to go after them. And I think that's important for us because that's called the restraint of government. And as Republicans, let's change things through ideas and through the process that we believe in democracy. Let's not use the state as a tool to punish businesses and those that make different decisions. I think that's important as you look at a Republican philosophy and the restraint of government. We'll also have to deal with inflation today. And whenever you look at families in New Hampshire putting gas in their car and the cost of fuel, it's a concern. How did we get here with this high cost of inflation that's undermining our paychecks? And the answer is we're spending a lot of money. We're spending a lot of money, more than we ever have. Much of it was needed during the pandemic, but there has to be an end to vast amounts of federal money coming in to pull us out of the pandemic, because we are recovering and we have recovered from an economic standpoint. This last week, the White House called me and wanted me to accept another $143 million of social spending relief for our state. And I told the White House that we haven't spent the money you sent us to begin with yet. And they said, yes, but you need this. I said, no, we don't. And so I turned down $143 million of federal money because we don't need it. We are back to a pre-pandemic employment level, and we have our sufficient social network and safety net for them. Spending is a challenge for us, but it's also about what do we need to do to get our supply chain moving again. And the supply chain, it hurts us as well, drives up the cost. We're too dependent upon China. We're too dependent upon manufacturers that go overseas. We need to bring more manufacturing back to the United States of America. And part of that is what we've done in Arkansas. I'm very proud of the fact that we recruited U.S. Steel that's building their latest technologically advanced steel mill in eastern Arkansas right on the Mississippi River. It's a $3 billion investment. It is going to create 900 jobs that pay an average of $100,000 apiece. That's an extraordinary investment. And why did they come to Arkansas? Because we are encouraging steel production, and we still believe that people can make things in the United States of America. We're good at making things in Arkansas, and we want to be able to return that manufacturing, whether it is in steel or whether it is in other products and medical supplies that we need. You're good at building things in New Hampshire. We need to return more of that capacity here back to the United States, and that helps us with our supply chain, makes us not dependent upon foreign sources to the same extent. So Arkansas soon will surpass Pennsylvania as the leading steel-producing state in the United States. And I'm proud of that fact, and it's good for America. And the same thing is true with energy. We should not be dependent upon our energy sources from Venezuela, from Saudi Arabia, or from Russia. We have to be energy independent. We have done it before. We've got to do it again. And all that's about the supply chain that will help us to control those costs. We have a challenge today in America with violent crime that impacts our families. And I have a little bit of experience as a former United States attorney. I believe that the rule of law is what separates us from the rest of the world. Our justice system, the fact that you can count on the rule of law to work in our country. And we have to be able to enforce the law and to keep our families safe. While I was governor in, 2020, we had the murder of George Floyd in Minnesota. We had across cities in America protests, and some of those protests turned violent. In Little Rock, Arkansas, the protest had a violent element that was destroying property, burning buildings, and endangering people. There was not sufficient enforcement. I took action. I called in the state police, set up a command center, and I called in the National Guard. We made about 70 arrests in one night, and guess what? The violence stopped. But the protests, the peaceful protests, were allowed to continue. I did a second thing. I called in the young, youthful protesters, and I met with them. I said, tell me about yourself and your concerns. And they explained it to me, and they wanted to make a difference. So I asked them, those young protest leaders, to serve on a task force with law enforcement to make recommendations for change. That's what they wanted. And as a result of that, we've increased training. We have improved their equipment, body cameras in some instances, and we have raised the salaries of law enforcement officers in our state. And in fact, we just passed a one-time bonus for every certified law enforcement officer in Arkansas of $5,000 each, just to show them we support them. But to me, there's two fundamental points here. One, the rule of law matters in America, and we have to enforce the law. We cannot disintegrate into anarchy and violence in our cities. And secondly, we have to be able to listen to one another. And we listen to one another. We're not dividing, but we're bringing people together. And to me, that is critically important. We have the 2022 elections coming up. Well, I want to make a difference in those elections just like you do. And so in 2022, we need leaders who are problem solvers and not simply chaos creators. We need problem solvers and not chaos creators. And so we as a Republican Party, my party, we ought to be talking about the ideas for the future, the principles that define our party, of limited government, of restraint on government, of lower taxes, less regulation, business growth. We believe that the private sector ought to be growing faster than the government sector. We ought to be addressing the challenges that we see from inflation to crime to improving education. This is what America needs to be hearing. And yes, the 2022 election is not going to be complete without a debate as to America's role in world affairs. What we've seen in Ukraine has changed everything dramatically. When you have families that go home at night and they not only worry about gasoline prices, but they also are asking two questions about Ukraine. Are we doing enough? Do we need to do more as a country? Because it rips at the heart of all of us to see a sovereign country attacked by an autocrat dictator from Russia, that's killing people without any mercy. And so, yes, I believe that we ought to stand with Ukraine. I believe that we need to support them. We need to be aggressive. We need to be quick. And we need to make sure that America can lead. And when it comes to Ukraine, I believe it is very, very important that we do not let Russia and Mr. Putin dictate U.S. policy as to how we are going to help defend Ukraine. Ukraine needs to be defended. We need to stand with Ukraine, and we should not be letting Russia dictate the terms of our engagement there. Certainly we need to be wise about it, but we need to act quickly and we need to be forceful in our engagement there. I'm going to be traveling across the country in 2022, trying to help our candidates by showing an example of leadership that addresses challenges and problems that we face, and talking about the ideas and principles that we believe in our party. And I think leadership does make a difference every day, and the role of the world is incredible. When I was at the DEA in the Bush administration, one of my first visits, it's almost mandatory for a new DEA administrator to go to Mexico City. And this is during the time, and they're still active, but the cartels, and particularly the Ariana Felix cartel that controlled the Tijuana Plaza coming into the United States. Violent, killing people unmercifully, causing incredible damage in Mexico and the United States. And I went there to Mexico City, and I had a news conference, and the Mexican is room about this size with all the media there, and they were peppering me with questions. And they were saying, what do you want? What does the United States want Mexico to do in the fight against drugs? And I said, I didn't come down here to tell you what to do. You're a sovereign country. You can make your decisions. We want to support you in that. They kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and finally I just said, all right, I want the government of Mexico to get the Ariana Felix brothers, Ben Amin and Ramon Ariana Felix, and I don't care whether you get them dead or alive. That might have been a little bit of a strong statement at that moment in time since I was in Mexico City. I left, I came back to the United States. Within 30 days, the government of Mexico had captured Ben Amin, and Ramon, his brother, had been killed. The Attorney General, John Ashcroft, loved to go across America and say, I sent Asa down there to Mexico, and he told them he wanted the Ariana Felix brothers dead or alive, and they gave him one of each. America makes a difference in our leadership role, and we can lead, but we lead out of goodness. We lead because of our history of loving freedom, and because we want to be an influence that helps people across the globe. And that applies to our own safety as well. When you look at the southern border, you bet we need to protect it. We need to protect it, and it's about policy, it's about having resources there, but it's also about having a strategy with Mexico to go after the cartels that are causing enormous damage to the United States of America with their fentanyl, with their human trafficking, and we have to be able to tackle that. Let me end before I want to make sure we have time for questions, but I started with Ronald Reagan's trip to New Hampshire. And of course, I had an opportunity when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office to go into the Oval Office and meet with Ronald Reagan. And it's the first time I was in the Oval Office, such a thrill for me as coming off the farm in Gravette, and to be able to see a president that I admired. And of course, you memorize everything when you're there, and you think about what Ronald Reagan stands for. And there's three characteristics of Ronald Reagan that I believe are important to emulate today. One is he was a consistent, common-sense conservative. Whether he lost in 1976 or he won in 1980, his philosophy didn't change. Secondly, he was a pragmatic. Whenever he got elected, he could work with Tip O'Neill to get some things done for our country, sort of like the New England Business Council. And he was successful because of that. And then thirdly, he was always an optimist about our country. And whenever you look at the challenges that he inherited, very similar to the challenges that we face today, and yet he believed in America. And today, I'm an optimist about our country. With the challenges, we face, but I know the spirit of America is greater than any of those challenges. And I want us to see us to succeed as a party based upon principles and as a country based upon our common shared values that wants to make America strong and free for the future. Thank you very much.
So we have time for a few questions for the governor. Governor, just getting back to Ukraine, the United States has issued another $800 million in military ammunition. How much more is necessary? How much more would you support? And the second part of the question is, we've already committed to accepting 100,000 of refugees from Ukraine. Do you think we should increase that?
Yes and yes. First of all, the Ukraine refugees will naturally go to much of Europe, and they want to return to their country, and that's an easy place to do it. But there are Ukrainians that have relatives in the United States. We ought to accept those that need to flee from that safety. So our doors should be open to Ukrainians that have no other option there. In terms of our support for Zelensky and Ukraine, we need to give them what's needed. We need to give them what's needed to win. To win. It's not enough for a stalemate. We don't want to end this with Russia gaining territory. I was pleased with Secretary Blinken saying that we want to weaken Russia's military strength from this. That's a much more aggressive position than we've taken before, and I support that. This administration has really done a good job in bringing Europe together to support our mission there and to protect Ukraine. They recognize what's at risk to them. We've just moved slower than we would like, and I wish we would have had this view of recognizing that the risk to the rest of Europe and the world early on, and we could have got more in there more quickly. It would have saved more lives. But we need to back them up, and want to emphasize that we cannot let Russia dictate our terms of engagement. They've tried to threaten us that if you go too far, we're going to take it a step and escalate. We can't be cowed by them. We have to stand firm and determine our own mission there and how we're going to define it and how we're going to support Ukraine.
Questions? You mentioned about the border, big issue with an awful lot of people. Your thoughts on how the administration has handled the border situation?
Poorly. It's made mistake after mistake. First of all, I know Central America, I know Mexico, and whenever you put the welcome mat out, they're going to come. And we want to accept those that have legitimate asylum claims, but we have to be able to process those asylum claims on the Mexico side. That's what was done during the Trump administration under Title 42. The Biden administration made a mistake in trying to lift it, and even though the court reimposed it, it was too late because the message had already been sent. And then once again, they want to lift it while they want to fight to keep the public health requirements in our airlines and our transportation systems. They want to lift it in terms of our border security. So it seems very inconsistent to me, but most importantly, we cannot lift Title 42, which allows us to process them on the Mexican side, and it slows that down and gives us better control over the border. We can't lift that unless there is an alternative that gives us that same level of protection. We've got to be able to address that. It's a there's many different prongs to the challenge that we face there, but it can be fixed. We've proven that in the past, even though it's always a challenge. But it's going to take a consistent message that our border is not open.
Hi. Your record on transgender kind of youth stuff is pretty nuanced. And I was wondering what you think the role of government should be is a good kind of cultural war battle for Republicans to wage? Will it help them? Will it hurt them?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you recognizing that position can be nuanced. And I think we need leaders with clear policy, but at the same time, ones that can be defended, and sometimes you just have to explain it. But in terms of what we've done in Arkansas and what I've signed into law as governor, I had two bills that came to my desk. One bill was passed by the legislature that prohibited biological males from engaging in women's sports, in girls' sports. And I have a daughter. I love women's sports. I think they ought to be able to compete under Title IX, and this undermined it. So I signed that into law, prohibiting biological males from competing in women's sports. The second bill came to me, which was a broad-based bill that interferes with the parents making decisions with their children and with a physician on how you treat a minor. And I looked at that, and first of all, there wasn't a grandfather clause in there. If it had been a simple bill that would have prohibited sex reassignment surgeries, I would have signed that in a moment. But it went much further than that. It was a bad bill, and I looked at it and I said, this does not reflect the Republican view of we ought to have a restraint of government. The key is that every challenge that we see or cultural issue that we face in America, you have to say, we need to do something about that, but you also need to say, what's the right response? Is it the family? Is it the school board? Do we need to pass a law that addresses this sensitive issue? And I think those are questions. That's what a common sense restraint of government debate should be about. And I made the decision that bill went too far. I vetoed it. They overrode that veto. So it is a little bit nuanced. You mentioned the cultural war. I don't like the idea of passing bills in a cultural war so we can fire up our base. That, to me, is not the way I conduct politics. I want to talk about how we can restrain government and how we can lower taxes and we grow our economy. We can handle inflation. And so every battle and defining point doesn't have to be a cultural war response.
Other questions? Jeff?
I really appreciated all your comments, but I got to tell you frankly that I'm really so saddened and scared about what's happening in this country, probably as scared as I was back in the 60s when I grew up. I mean, could you give me a sense, any sense of optimism that we could turn this around so reasonable people who may violently disagree about certain issues could come together and, as you said, come up with some compromise and show some leadership? Because I don't see that, from voter suppression on and on and on. And I think we're losing control, and I'm wondering if you give me any sense of optimism as we leave today. Thank you.
Well, as long as we have New Hampshire politics, there's going to be excitement, there's going to be disagreement, and that's the nature of it. And so we have to recognize that, and there's differences of views. But, while we fight hard, I'm very optimistic that we can come together when you elect leaders that listen and that believe it is more important to unite than to divide. That's a fundamental point. And so whenever you look at the challenges that we face in the spirit of America, whenever Ukraine was attacked, there was a unity of spirit and resolve in America that this is wrong and that we want to support Ukraine. Now, there's some differences there, but America can be united, and strong leadership makes the difference there. Whenever the infrastructure bill was considered in Congress, I applaud those members of Congress that worked in a bipartisan way to get it passed. As a governor, I supported that. I didn't support all their spending bills, but I did that. And so I think you just have to look at it that we have our challenges, absolutely, but I think the spirit of America is fundamentally strong. It is free. And whenever we are faced with challenges, we're going to rise up to take them on. There wasn't a more difficult time in our country than during the Iran hostage crisis, during the Cold War, during the times of high inflation, high interest rates. You remember those. And we turned it around, and we can do that again. So I'm optimistic, and I believe we can because we're Americans.
Other question? Ed?
Who should the next director of the DEA, oh, I'm sorry. Thanks for being here, Governor. Who should the next director of the DEA go after to stem the fentanyl crisis? The Mexicans or the Chinese, or please expound.
First of all, we have to build an alliance with Mexico to go after the cartel, and which is the fentanyl distribution network, as well as other drugs that come into our country. And you know, when I was head of the DEA, we had vetted units in Mexico. We shared intelligence. We identified who we needed to go after, and that happened. Now, that's part of the challenge, and we need to strengthen that network again. We also need to look at the United States and always focus on the fact that we have a demand problem here. And we need to have education. We need to have, you know, our recovery efforts that we invest in. I know Governor Sununu has done that, and that's what saves lives, but it also reduces that demand that comes from Mexico. And you're right, some of the chemicals come from China. We've got to put pressure on China every day, and China is a whole new topic that we haven't discussed yet. It's probably one of the most important issues that we face as a country, not just dealing with Russia, but how we're going to address China into the future, the second largest economy in the world. But we have to put constraints on some of the unregulated chemicals that are such a danger to America that's coming from China into Mexico and up that southwest border. So that's the DEA obviously has a critical role in that. They always have, and we need to get back to the basics there.
Maybe one final question. I could just ask, put your political hat on. There are a lot of governors, Republican governors, that are up for re-election. Ohio, Georgia. Can you give us a little capsule of how you think they're doing and how successful they're going to be?
Just a couple of them, and I'd love to hear Governor Sununu's comments on this. But first of all, Brian Kemp deserves to win re-election in Georgia, and he should win re-election in Georgia. Very proud of his integrity, how he's handled himself. He's got a tough opponent that President Trump endorsed, but Brian is leading in the polls, and I expect him to win. You know, whenever you look at, give me another state. Ohio, you know, you've got a Senate race there and a governor's race there, and this is an example of where this is one of the risks. I mean, I can't predict who's going to win. I think we can keep the governorship there, absolutely. But whenever you have a divisive primary, you've got to be able to come together after it, or it's going to cost you in the general election. And so that's a risk to us this year, is creating chaos through the primary that we can't remedy quick enough. And so, you know, whenever you look at those states, we got an open race in Arizona, both the Senate a contested race, but Governor Ducey's not running for re-election. I think you're going to have a very exciting race there, but there's a number of candidates, and I can't predict the winner there, but I do believe that you'll see Republicans maintain a significant majority of governorships this year across the country, and I do believe that we were going to win the Senate back. I don't think that whenever we win, it doesn't mean that all is right in the world. We still got our challenges, but it's really going to be, as America wants, a check and balance on this administration, and I think that's important, and I think America sees that. So I think we will maintain that control. You all are a terrific audience today. Thank you for hosting this. It's great to be with you. I hope I can come back to New Hampshire again. Thank you.